Dr. Farida, ladies and gentlemen. The topic that was given to me is provision in law, immigration law for domestic helper. And I believe later on I will touch a bit more on trafficking in person, because my portfolio in the immigration department is as a deputy director, and my portfolio is operational, and anti-trafficking unit is under me. And in the first place, the invitation was invited a representative from the domestic helper division. But when they talk about law, they're scared to come, so they send me here. I have a few legal, a little bit legal academic background, and perhaps I got the guts to be here. I think so, because I believe if you were in front of NGOs and also with the trade unions, you'll be getting shot from everywhere. But I don't mind, because my scope is more on provision of law on foreign workers, especially domestic maids. Okay. Next. My point of discussion is going to talk about foreign domestic helper, that is WCMAIL, and then secondly talking about immigration regulation 1963, and the normal offences that we found that offenders are from domestic helper, and offences by employer, and other related offences, and case law on without lawful authority has in possession of someone else's passport. Okay. Next. Okay, in Malaysia there are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. There are the countries that allow to be as a source country to get maids from. Okay. And next, and the maids, the condition of the maids must be a female. It's not male. Okay. But in certain cases there is male also, but you need the approval of the Home Ministry. And then not less than 21 years. And I believe all these are all in our website. You can surf our website. I think www.imi.gov.com. Right? Next. And eligibility of requirements. Right? The employer should have children under 15 years or parents who are sick. Next. And the employer qualification of wages. If they, for Indonesian, at least employers' net income 3,000 per month. So to enable them to pay for the maids. Next. And then for Muslims, employees who are Muslim are allowed to hire only Muslim foreign domestic helpers. This is the policy that being set by Home Ministry. Next. And other additional conditions ensure that as does not marry in this country while on visit past temporary government. So in the contract they cannot get married. If they want to get married, they have to terminate and get married. So there won't be what do you call it? That is one of the conditions that the maids who wanted to be here. And then the foreign domestic helper is not allowed to apply for entry permits while she has to use the visit pass temporary employment. The entry permits are for those who are going to get permanent resident status. Entry permits are for permanent resident status. And foreign domestic helper are not allowed to apply for entry permits. Unless they are normal domestic helper, they're married to a Malaysian, follow their husband under spouse program, they can apply after 5 years of marriage. That's the condition. Among the conditions for foreign domestic helper, they are not allowed to marry, and also they cannot apply for entry permit. Okay, next. So there's a lot there. It's all in our website, I think, And perhaps there's one item, one sentence that is going to be sensitive, but I've already asked the authorization to amend that thing. Is for those the domestic helper who ran away. One of the conditions is the employer have to produce the original passport. It's wrong. So it's as though we are giving blessing for the employers for the passport. So I already minuted it to my Director General, and she agreed that it's a mistake to put in there at least only a copy of a passport, because we are being accused for retaining employer and being accused for retaining employee's passport, but it's wrong according to the law. And in that website, I did amend it, but I did propose to amend it. It's not me to do it, perhaps the Public Relations Division, but the proposal was given to them, and we need to amend that. For example, if the maid ran away, so at least a copy of a passport should be produced and a police report. As Datuk Farida maids ran away, I think she did that, police report, and you don't have to produce the original passport, because if you produce, you said that the employer had to produce an original passport, it means that we are giving, the government is giving blessing on someone else who held a possession of someone else's passport. So we are amending it. Okay? Next. And then required documents for FDA, the passport, this versa. I think it's a normal application for it. Next. Visit pass temporary employment will be given. Next. Extension of visit pass temporary employment for maids. I believe as long as the employer wants them to be here, they can get their temporary employment pass be extended. They don't have any say after 5 years they have to go back. No. Forever. For maids. But not to the policy on other foreign workers. Foreign workers, they have their deadline, not forever. But for maid, yes. As long as the employer wants them to be here. Next. Next. This is a checkout memo. Means that once the maid wanted to go back, so for the employer not to be forfeited the so-called personal bond given to the department, so checkout memo of application should be made. It's a letter to show at the airport that they're going out. Okay, it is, they call it checkout memo. Next. And the report for the workers who have absconded. So number 2 there, copy of employer's passport. That is what I amended in my PowerPoint, but not in the website. The website is going to be amended soon. We detected this during the meeting in the Anti-Trafficking Council. Something to do with the US accusing, did a survey on electronic industry. There's 28% element of trafficking in the electronic factory, owned by one what they call it, surveyor company, right? So in there, the chairperson told me that the immigration inside our immigration website, as though the passport, we are blessed for the employer to hold a passport. So I did make that amendment. Okay, next. This is a list of clinics and hospitals, and those domestic helper, they need to be healthy, right? If the clinics say that for MEMA, say that they are not unhealthy, so we have to reject the application. Okay. For the first 3 years, they have to go through for MEMA medical examination. Then after that 3 years, 4th year, they don't need to do that. Next. Okay, now we come to regulations. So under Immigration Regulation 1963, so under section 11(1), so is it the visit pass issued by the immigration controller other than a prohibited migrant is a temporary employment pass. So for domestic helper, we issue temporary employment pass year-to-year basis. Okay. Next. Offences, domestic helper, Regulation 39B, Immigration Regulation 1963. Any person who without reasonable cause contravene or fails to comply with any condition imposed in respect or instruction endorsed on any pass is an offender. So here, if a domestic helper was to work with Mr. A, they cannot go to work with Mr. B. So if they were found by the enforcement officer, they will be arrested. Okay? Then later on be investigated. Why you work there? Perhaps they said, I don't know, my employer asked me to work there. It depends on the investigation. But most of cases, we found mates working in spa. Last week, mates were raped in spa in Serdang. There are 2 mates, domestic helper, in spa working. So they contravene the condition of the pass, because the pass say you have to work with so and so, but they contravene. Like Dato' Farida say, sometimes the maid was sent to the mother and also sent to the brother's house. So it's more like manipulating his mates. And perhaps if there's complaint, we have to take action. Right? Okay? Then section 15(1)(c) is overstay. So if you are given 1 year and you overstay the pass, so it is also an offense under immigration law. Immigration law. And section 6(1)(c) is those illegal mates. They don't have any temporary employment pass. They work illegally. So here, the mates can be charged under section 6(1)(c) of the Immigration Act. Okay, next. Offences of employer, section 55B, Immigration Act. 55B(1) say be liable employing a person who is not in possession of valid pass. The employer be liable to a fine not less than 10,000. Here when he said employer, a person employ who is not in possession of valid pass, although your temporary employment, for example, valid for Mr. A, you are found to working with Mr. B, the valid pass deems to be invalid according to the law. Okay? Because you contravene the condition of that pass. Okay? Secondly is 55B2 if they employ more than 5 employees. But 55B2 doesn't go to maid because one employer sometimes the most he got 1 or 2 mates unless the employer is a rich guy get more than 5 mates. Okay? Then section 56(1)(b) for the employer who harbors any person whom he knows believing to be acted in contravention of this act. So harboring. So when we went for rape, and then there is a mate who have no passport, no nothing. The employer can be taken action for harboring and illegal mates. Next. These other offences related to passport possession. Here, according to section 12(1)(f), according to our Passport Act, without lawful authority has in his possession any passport or internal document issued for the use of some other person than himself, shall be guilty to a fine not exceeding 10K, to imprisonment not exceeding 5 years, or to both. Here, the issue here is without lawful authority. We have the law, the provision in Immigration Act, that it is wrong to have a possession or to keep someone else's passport. Okay? But when you go to the ingredient of the provision is lawful authority, so there's no written definition on lawful authority. But we have depend on precedent cases. What is lawful authority? Right? I tried to prepare regarding whether the government is a lawful authority or not. Right. In Law Wycombe versus BP, there's a case before. Law Wycombe is something to do with Malaysian passport. It is not talking about lawful authority. It's talking about a privilege or a right. So in Law Wycombe, the federal court decided that the passport is not a right of that person. It is only a privilege of the person. But the right is the government that issued the passport. It is not relevant in this case. Okay? But when you talk about lawful authority, when there is no written definition, you have to assume on Margarita de Cruz versus BP. Next. Next. I'm talking about Margarita de Cruz. This is a story about the case before. Is about one Filipino girl. He was arrested by the police in possession of two other passports doesn't belong to herself. Okay? The police brought her to court, charged her under the lower court, magistrate court, and it is a badly drafted kind of charge because the section is section 12.1F, there he put 12.1G. It's wrong under the precedent case. Well, first thing is badly drafted. Secondly is during the mitigation means before the judge pass a verdict. During mitigation, Margarita say, Your Honor, this is my friend's passport. My friend went to Ipoh. So the passport was newly issued by the Philippine Embassy and they gave it to me to keep. Okay? But anyway, although the mitigation is there, still the magistrate judge sentencing her. So she was imprisoned. Later on, they went appeal to High Court. So High Court quashed the decision of the lower court because during that mitigation, what Margarita say can be considered a qualified plea because there's not being rebutted by the prosecution. So the prosecution never produced the owner of passport to the stand to say that the passport was given unwillingly. So there is not being collaborated, right? So here in this case, what we learn from it means lawful authority are the owner of the passport. So here, if the owner of the passport gave consent, perhaps he or she himself gave the lawful authority to that person to keep. Me, myself, as an authority, government, I have no lawful authority. I cannot keep someone else's passport. I can only keep someone else's passport if it is an exhibit. If I go for it, and then search, there's passport. The passport is an exhibit. Exhibit means barang case to court. If not, I have no lawful authority to simply get someone else's passport. I have no lawful authority if I take my wife's passport without her consent. So here we are talking about a technicality in law. If you talk on the surface, it's wrong to have someone else's passport. But when you talk about no real definition of written definition, we have to go on precedent case. This is among the precedent case that we can assume. But I'm not advising anyone. It's up to the court to decide. For example, if the employer say, I got an authorized letter from my employee from my mate to keep the passport for safekeeping, it's not for me to decide. Let the court decide. You understand what I'm trying to say? So here, by law, by Malaysian law, Passport Act is wrong to have in possession of someone else's passport. That's my message. Can you return back because I next.
Go back.
Okay. Although my subject is not on trafficking, but when Datuk Farida talking about trafficking is now, I feel that I have to add a little bit more because immigration is among the agency that was empowered to deal with trafficking. In immigration law, there's nothing to talk about abusing this and that. So here, the trafficking law is a complement of immigration law, whereby if a domestic helper is being abused and a victim of trafficking, they have immunity. If you have a forged passport, we can't charge you on the Immigration Act or Passport Act. You have a forged endorsement, or you don't have anything, or you are illegal. If you are a victim, you are immune. You have the immunity under Anti-Trafficking Act. Okay? Then when you talk about offences, normally in under Anti-Trafficking Act offences, it goes to the perpetrators. It means the syndicate or the employers. It goes to the perpetrators, not the victim. When perpetrators, Section 12, trafficking in person, adults. So here the perpetrators in Section 12, we don't have to prove much on exploitation, because in Section 12, our definition of trafficking goes to illegal activity. Although it's not the same as what in the protocol of United Nations Transnational Organized Crime on suppress of children, women under trafficking. In the protocol doesn't say about illegal activity, but additional value was put by our AG chambers on additional of illegal activities. Here, for example, a person, when we went for raids at the brothel, we have found the proof that so-called prostitute, we have proof that this so-called lady is a prostitute, the operator of the brothel can be charged under Section 12. Although the prostitute volunteered to be a prostitute, because voluntariness is not relevant in Section 12. But Section 13, it talks about means of threat and force. You have to prove the threat, you have to prove the force, and you have to prove the deceit. What type of deceit being given. So 12 is more easier, but it's more on trying to combat on this so-called sex industry, illegal sex industry. So this is among the weapon that we had in our provision, right? It's not the same as the international benchmarking, but although it's not international benchmarking on trafficking, but Section 12, it provides us to do that. So illegal operators, sex operators are scared if we go to Section 12. Okay? Then 13, it goes to adults, but we have to push the element of force. And 14 are offense of trafficking in children, means 18 years and below. So the additional thing, what immigration is going to be involved in future, what they call it, to bring us up to tier 2. So like Dr. Farida said, they are going to be allowed to work. So once a victim was put under a shelter, we are going to give them a special pass to go out of the shelter. One special pass valid for 1 month. But with that special pass, they cannot work yet. They have to find an employer, and once they got an employer, then we have to transfer the thing into the work pass. So they are free from staying at the shelter. But perhaps the employer will be given the condition that once we need to have that so-called victim to court, they have to cooperate in that matter. So victim can be given 3 months, 1 month, 1 month, for the purpose of like finding a job. But the victims are not going to run around finding a job. There's a mechanism to do it. Perhaps from the what do you call it? Job Malaysia, betul? Job Malaysia will find a job for them. And we are not going to concentrate on only forced labor, because last time we did that for forced labor, but the USA you cannot disaggregate. You have to be fair to everybody. So here even sex labor, sex trafficking also, we have to comply on not confining them, and perhaps we have to go to case by case, because like I said just now, Section 12, maybe they are real prostitute, but we have to assume them as a victim, because to cripple the sex industry, illegal sex industry operator on that Section 12, right? But whatever, the big deal here is if they are allowed to be outside, we won't have any trouble if the trial goes for a year or two. Doesn't matter, because the victims are already at their liberty, not being confined. But right now I can say a few victims that I met, our immigration cases, I pity them. If they follow the system, they are as though they are being confined. But if they don't follow the system, they go to Tenaga Nita, they are not being confined by the government as it is right now, right? But I believe in near future is going to be cooperation between government and NGO more closely on that matter. So, and for that, I thank you very much, and for the QA, thank you.
Thank you, Don Fauzi. I just want to remind the topic of this panel is the way forward, empowering knowledge on laws and policies relating to the protection of domestic workers in Malaysia. So we had two insights from Dr. Farida, who gave us an overview on human trafficking with the definition, with an emphasis on the definition of human trafficking, and what comes true is the exploitation. The word exploitation is glaring. She also gave us information on the modus operandi of human trafficking, situation and conditions of trafficked women, children, and in particularly domestic workers in Malaysia. The crimes were also given in the form of a chart, and the impact of these crimes on the victims and survivors. She clearly stated why we are at Tier 3, also sharing with us the gaps and the lack of human rights framework in the legislation and policies in Malaysia. She mentioned the least numbers, or why there are very least numbers of cases in prosecuting employers and traffickers. And finally, giving us an input on the amendments to the Act that is being tabled at the Parliament sitting right now, and some of the recommendations that she has shared with us. Else we had Tuan Fauzi from Immigration, who gave us the conditions of employment of domestic workers in Malaysia, the amendments that he had mentioned to the DG of Immigration, to the immigration policies in regards to withholding of passports, the insights of the Immigration Act and policies relating to domestic workers, emphasizing once again on the withholding of passports. And some input on how immigration uses the ATIP SOM, that's the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act and Smuggling of Migrant, 2017 to 2007, to prosecute traffickers. But I also personally, and I'm sure many of you would like to hear from him maybe later in a Q&A session, as to how immigration has used ATIP SOM Act to prosecute employers who are labor trafficking domestic workers, right? So right now we have 25 minutes for a
12, right? Because you say it's easier. But I want to link to Dr. Farida. What happened is it involved international syndicate. Will the victim be given shelter protection? Thank you.
Right. Can we have 2 more questions before we get the panel speakers to answer? Mr. Raja, can we have the mic?
Yeah, my name is Rajesh Agrana from the Factory Workers Union. You mentioned about, you mentioned about this Margarita case about holding passport. I'm not sure whether that Margarita was an employer or another co-worker. But this is 1987. But there are hundreds of cases where agents or employers holding not just 2 passports, but hundreds of passports of their workers. So have there been any further prosecution? That's one. I also I'm quite interested to know what happened to the police case where the prosecution apparently took place. What kind of punishment penalty was imposed on that employer? Now, another question that among the trade unions always comes out. We have the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act, which is very noble, very good. Make it sound, when you read it, it looks very good. But then, the government has issued license to about 200 over agents to bring workers and sell them for profit, which is clearly in violation of the Act. Why is that?
Thank you, Mr. Raja. Can I have this over here, the last questions? We'll take the first 3 set of questions.
Thank you. My name is Karuna from the National Union of Bank Employees. I have a question for both Datuk Farida and Encik Fauzi. Firstly, I think this Tier 3 is just not confined to victim protection and confinement. There are several issues that the US Department has actually highlighted as to why Malaysia has fallen into Tier 3. So besides looking at one amendment that's coming up probably next month with regards to detention of victims, victim protection, etc. There are several other issues which has repeatedly since 2011 come up as a complaint basis in the International Labour Organization. Now, since 2011, the government has not given any concrete answers to the complaints at the international level, International Labour Organization, ILO. We would like to actually, I would personally like to know what are the steps that has been taken, because the humantrafficking.org also has carried the extract from the US Department where they have given several recommendations, and these recommendations are not new. They are recommendations which have been repeated on a yearly basis or annually, for the last 3-4 years. So what are the actions that have been taken with regards to these recommendations? Now, the other aspect is, of course, Convention 189, ILO Convention 189 and Recommendation 102. Now, the ILO has been embarking on this for a very long time. We also looked at the fact that even the countries where the migrant workers or the domestic workers are actually coming from have not even rectified Convention 189 or Recommendation 102. So what efforts are we, Malaysia, taking to rectify Convention 189, Recommendation 102? What efforts are we taking? Is there any effort that's being put into place so far? Now, 189 is also very closely tied to freedom of association. Now, most of the time, though the Employment Act does not restrict migrant workers or migrant domestic workers from joining or forming trade unions, but there is always this question or the answer that's given to us, not question, answer that's given to us that says that the Immigration Act doesn't allow formation of unions. The Immigration Act doesn't allow workers, migrant workers, to be organized. So what is the issue that, how is the government actually looking at this? Because we are basically breaching the freedom of association. So, and of course, the Human Rights Declaration as well, Universal Declaration of Human Rights as well. So these are my, and I would like some responses.
Thanks, Ms. Karuna. Can we just have the panel of speakers answer these 3 questions before we go another round?
No, I because I want to bring up the same issue as Mr.
Okay.
Segrest. That's why I want to pick up. This is mainly to the immigration office, Mr. Speaker.
To Inche Fauzi, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm here, I'm staying back because of you. Because they say that there's somebody officer from the immigration officer. So the same question I'm throwing to the immigration section. Why is it that the immigration office giving so much of approval on the agents? Not only agents, the other individual cases. Where even this was discussed closed door within the QPEX leaders. Even the officers are not happy, some of the officers are not happy that certain approval was given, certain privileges was given to certain people to have to access to certain, how should I put it, certain convenience they have to get people into the country. So, I mean, this is something that the immigration office to address, should address seriously. I'm sure that, Encik Fauzi, you are here today. I don't think you can give us a perfect answer, but please send a message back. But after this seminar, I'm also going to discuss this in QPEX within a small group. Maybe I'm going to send a message across. Okay?
Thank you, Ms. Loh. Can we have the speakers to answer the question?
Thank you for those who posed the questions. Before I go further, I think I better tackle Ms. Loh, what you call it, it's now a comment, and also something to do with agent. Okay, when you talk about domestic helper, there is appointed agent, appointed by immigration to deal with domestic helper. But we don't deal with any agents on other foreign workers. But when you talk about outsourcing, it is not the jurisdiction of immigration. It is those home ministry. Because before that, we tried to amend to put a Foreign Workers Domestic Control Act, but it was not approved by Parliament. Just because Employment Act is already there to cover this so-called foreign worker domestic. During my KP, Dato' Alias was Under Secretary of KDN. I was there involving amending. But they appointed outsourcing administratively without any, what do you call it, binding by law under Agency Pekerjaan Swasta, APS, Agency Pekerjaan Swasta Act. So when you talk about agent, right now what I can say is immigration jurisdiction, we only appoint agent for domestic help. But others, nothing to do with us. It is jurisdiction of Home Ministry, my bosses, bigger bosses. I'm an implementer. I'm not a policy maker. Right? So the reality that I have to say, I'm being governed by political leaders. That's the reality as it is. Right? But that is where I respond on this matter. Not to say I disagree with you, or I'm just telling you explanation, my situation. I'm an implementer. What is wrong is wrong. Okay? What is right according to the law. If they say, no, you don't need to charge the person, just send them back. I don't mind, just send them back. Okay? It's up to the public prosecutor to decide. We are only the implementer. I am an investigation officer, I'm a fact finder. I find all the facts, bring up to the public prosecutor, let them decide. Okay? And when you talk about section 12 just now,
Tier 3 is justified.
I beg your pardon?
It just shows our classification of tier 3 is justified.
Oh, wait. Tier 3 is different matter. Because tier 3 thing, I think Dato' Melinda will add. No, when you talk about, no, because one of the element of outsourcing, if I may answer in behalf of the Mapo Secretary, there is no additional outsourcing. It's only 200 left.
They have cancer.
They have cancelled a lot. That is one of the elements that US say. We are honoring the outsourcing company, and they are the employer. They can supply. Actually, in the first place, the idea of outsourcing is that what I got to know when I was involved in the drafting the so-called outsourcing Public Controls Act is that sometimes factory industry, they don't have the production throughout the year. They have 8 months, so another 4 months. If they have this so-called employee, they have to spend this to pay the employee for the another 4 months for nothing. So that's why this so-called outsourcing came, so that another 4 months they can send to other factories that need to produce. But it's being exploited. It's being manipulated by them. That one is not out of my hand, right? Like I said just now, I'm just an implementer. And when come back to section 12, what I meant here is not to prosecute the prostitute, to prosecute the perpetrators, the operators of this so-called illegal sex industry. But when you come to the prostitute, we have to accept them as victims. You know what I mean? Yes. Yes. They will be given. Because we need to produce to the judge, and we have to convince the judge of our finding. The judge will decide whether they are victim or not. I am only saying they are potential victim, but the decision of whether they are victim or not, according to our law, is done by the judge. We are the fact finder to show to the judge that most potential that this so-called being rescued is victim. Okay? Then when you go to Margarita de Cruz, it's 1987. Not to say we don't have any cases. We got a lot of cases that we prosecute, but it doesn't become a precedent. It doesn't become a precedent case. I even prosecute, not prosecute, I investigated agents who are having their passport. But what the lack of it is that difficult to find the collaboration, the owner of the passport to be put in the stand. If you remember Badrul Zaman case, immigration cases, long time ago, a lot of passports was forfeited. And it doesn't even goes to high court. At lower court, there's no prima facie because the handling of evidence are totally collapsed. Handling of evidence, passport, whose passport is that, and during trial, it's difficult to find the holder of passport to put on the stand, say that the passport was not is taken against my will. You understand, sir? But according to the precedent case, what I had with me is Margarita. What I got when I was in Islamic University in UAE is this Margarita, is the classic case. To say, just the message is to say that who is the lawful authority? I'm not saying that there's no other cases, but perhaps the cases that my message can be delivered on lawful authority is Margarita, means that the owner passport is the lawful authority. But in our case, immigration, I was in Johor. It's a true story. I was enforcement in Johor. I received information that most of my, in Johor, they did their flying passport. Immigration is popular on flying passport, whereby the person never traveled, but the passport traveled. It happened to the Filipino case. It's a true story. Filipino case in TTDI last year. We rescued 36 Philippine ladies who are being sex exploitation. But at the end of the day, they don't want to testify. We have found all the indicators, but they don't want to testify. Okay? Why? I don't know why. But the fact is, I believe, when I was in an international forum, I think in Park Royal, something to do with the Philippine judge say, most of the cases in Southeast Asia are voluntary kind of trafficking. Why voluntary kind of trafficking? Because of poverty at their home country. They know that if they go out of their country, they will be trafficked. So they take the risk of going out of the country because to assist their family. And perhaps most of these international judges doesn't agree on that matter, but he has to say that this situation in his country, he's a judge of that country. I can recall, I have to check back the file, what is his name. That is the situation. That's why it's very difficult to get the testimony of that so-called person. Okay? Come back to this 36 ladies that we rescued. Later on, they don't want to testify. We want to charge them under the Immigration Act for overstaying. In our record, they have already overstayed their socialistic pass. Then we took them to court to judge. You know what happened? The lawyer came with a passport. Because we checked out the system, they have overstayed. Later on, after the second mentioned case, first mention, not guilty, second mention, the lawyer brought the passport with all the valid pass and the passport. So it's flying through Johor. So our case goes blunted. That's because the unintegrity officer in Johor already make the endorsement. It's matter of what negligence happened inside by the officer. It's not liability goes to that person. So it happened. Okay. So what next? Now we talk about Margarita, I think, and then talking about police case. Police case is still pending. Still pending. My DPP did went to police last month.
So the workers are still here.
No, workers gone back. They will be taken, all the statements will be taken. Workers will back. Because in trafficking is different. It's not the recording of statement that in front that investigation officer took. It's the recording of statement in front of the session court judge is the real thing that considered a document to testify against the accused at another time, and they can be sent back. Okay, and next, Dato' Walida. I think yours is on.
Encik Fauzi has answered most of the questions. Now there was a question why licenses are given to so many outsourcing company. I think Encik Fauzi has explained many of the licenses have been cancelled, right? And last year the government tried something to bring in workers by eliminating the agents. So now there is a pilot project that started last year where Bangladeshis workers are brought in government to government to eliminate the middle person, the agents, and also to cut down the amount of money that the workers from Bangladesh has to pay. So at the moment, the initial number was to bring in how many thousand? 40,000 workers. That's why there was a big hoo-ha during the last election when people say we brought in 40,000 Bangladeshis and so on, you know. It was actually these figures that of Bangladeshis to be brought in on a G2G basis. Alright, on another question, there were recommendations, same recommendations for the last 3 years on the TIP report. Why was it not moving? Now, I sit on the council as an NGO, right? I'm not a government officer on the council like our Tuan Fauzi. And in the council, the members are interministerial. Yeah, you have from the enforcement, you have there from immigration, police, for now Ministry of Health, you name it, they are there. And I realize it's not easy, even after the council has made a decision, it's very difficult to impose it to another ministry. This I realize. MAPO made a decision, but it doesn't mean they can direct other ministries to obey MAPO. Not easy. Remember I said it moves slower than the tortoise. It's not easy. I didn't realize that until I was on the council. Like for example, we've been talking a lot of this word gazette and so on and so forth. It wasn't moving only now after 6 or 7 years. At last, during the first amendment, we suggested it doesn't work. It went on and on and on, and a few of us NGOs in the council, we have been talking and talking about the same thing, but it's difficult to make government change their policies involving other ministries. That's the reason, the answer I can give. Other answers I cannot answer on behalf of the government ministries, yeah. And then another reason for the lower, for the tier 3 was because we had fewer identification. You know, when the police, when the enforcement agencies rescued the girls, sometimes they are really trafficking victims. But somehow during the questioning, investigation, and so on, they are not identified as traffic victims. Even sometimes, like Angel told me, they are domestic workers who has been exploited. But when they go and make a report at the police station, they are not identified as victims because there must be element of exploitation, and if there is not enough element of exploitation, they are not identified as traffic victims. And I think we have lost we have lost a lot of real traffic victims during the initial investigation, especially the first 2 weeks. That's why we got tier 3 because we had lower, the rate of identification was lower, lower investigation was lower, and fewer convictions. Another thing is, I realized, like in the police, yeah, they have a special unit in D7. To be in charge of, one of the unit is in charge of human trafficking. They get promoted, they get transferred. Then we start working with another group. And this is one thing we cannot help, you know, what's going on. The minute they get promoted, you know, like the first group of D7, we started together when the act came into force. Suddenly a new head came, the whole lot was transferred out. Then a new lot came in, and then there was this training going on to get them to be familiar with the act. After that, they get promoted, they go somewhere, and we got to keep on. Now also, there are new groups that come in. But luckily, Cik Fauzi has been there all this while. Fauzi, thank you for being there all the time. Cik Fauzi started in 2008. He is still there with us. So these are some of the reasons. I think I have answered all. Right? Any other questions? One more. One Cik Fauzi.
Yeah. just the G2G, Dato, apparently it didn't kick off from Bangladesh to Malaysia on the G2G. The business circle in Bangladesh was so strong that it stopped the government from sending the workers through G2G. It didn't kick off, though it was agreed between the two countries, Dato.
But some came in already, right? After.
See, when the government, as Brother Raja has mentioned, 272 agencies were given approval. Until today, some of them are bringing, because they were given 50,000, 100,000 approval. So some of them are still bringing the workers which they got approval many years back. That is what happening. So the G2G actually didn't kick off because the business circle in Bangladesh was so strong. They even threatened the government, the ministry officials in Bangladesh. This is what we have been notified during one of our meeting. Second, the other one important question, when the foreign workers are entering the country, the letters state that they shouldn't join any association. But why this discrimination when the Employment Act allows them to join trade union? Because of that small regulation where overruled the act. So that situation still exists because of that. Many employers are abusing that provision in that employment letter.
Thank you for the info. I think I will bring up this G2G thing at the next council meeting. Yes?
Oh, hold on, there were some ladies behind. I give to Shah, is this okay? We'll take another 3 questions.
Tuan Fauzi, we are privileged to have you here today. You are the best person to answer my question. Your department is in charge of passport control. Your department is in charge of protecting our national borders. Can you explain why today we have so many undocumented or illegal migrants?
Is that
and another question is, when your department do a raid on the brothel or night spot, we used to see women being paraded on our national TV. It's sad to see that their customers will not given the same privilege.
Thank you.
Is there a law? You used to prosecute the prostitute and the pimp. Is there a law to prosecute their customers? If so, I think there should be a law. So once there's no demand, there's no supply. The sex trade will stop right by itself.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that this is very much focused on labor trafficking of domestic workers. Because a lot of the questions have been focused on sex trafficking. But I think it is something serious, it needs to be discussed, but let's focus on the labor trafficking of domestic workers. With that, can I just have Sally, next question, Mr. Solomon, and Ashik, before we go on to other questions. Yeah, we still have till 1 o'clock, yes.
Thank you, Encik Fauzi. I have the domestic workers that come. I'm Sally Alexander. I'm from Penang and I volunteer with Tenaganita. The domestic workers that come to us asking for help do not have their passports, but they know where their passports are. They say my employer or my agent has the passport. So when they come to us, we help them to make a police report. And the first thing we ask is, can you help her to retrieve her passport? And we haven't received any help yet. The second thing we do, we go to the Labour Department to make a labour complaint because it's usually unpaid wages and long hours, so we make a complaint there. So we also ask there, will you please help her get her passport back? But nobody yet has helped us. The third place we then go is to immigration, and we ask there, can you please help get her passport back? And nobody has been able to help us there either. So
the worker herself is saying that they can give her employer's name, the address. Another thing that happens is when the visa is cancelled by the employer. So therefore we go to Labour and we want to ask for a special pass. And they will issue the letter. But when we go to immigration, they say, well, I cannot give you a special pass without the passport. Now, if the work permit has been cancelled, that means, and as I understand it, somebody has taken that passport to immigration to cancel the work permit. So that person will be the agent or the employer. So for us, we go round in circles from Labour Department, Police Department to Immigration. Labour Department usually tells us to go to the Police Department for help. Police Department tell us to go to Immigration, and Immigration tell us to go to the Labour Department. So could you, my question is, how can a domestic worker retrieve her passport when she's left her employer because her contract has been violated or breached by the employer? Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Can we have Mrs. Solomon? Next is Ashik.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, perhaps Fauzi will have the statistics. You were mentioning that you're more concerned in going after the perpetrators than the actual victims. One of the questions posed by the Committee for Freedom of Association at the International Labour Conference is the government of Malaysia was unable to give statistics how many employees were convicted. They were brought to court for charges, but how many were convicted was not actually given those facts. Maybe Encik Fauzi could give us some input on how many perpetrators were convicted in comparison to how many domestic workers were convicted. Secondly, you also mentioned that a domestic worker cannot work in another place even if it is the family members of the employer. If that is the case, you have also reported that some instances there are domestic workers who are found in the spa. And many a times we have seen that the authorities, the media has exposed very clearly on many of the domestic workers who are found in the spa and etc. Whereas the media has not exposed the perpetrators. Is there a need to actually expose all these victims, their faces, and the conditions they were actually napped at that moment? Why is the media so delighted in exposing the condition of the women, but not exposing the perpetrators? Is the government trying to do some changes to ensure that such exposures should be refrained or should be reduced? Instead of showing the poor victims, perhaps I think they should take into consideration exposing the perpetrators. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. John. Ashik.
Hi, my name is Ashik. I'm a volunteer with Tanaganita, as well as a researcher for Multimedia University for Migration and Corruption Studies. My question, one clarification and one question. The reason that the G2G actually stopped with Bangladesh and Malaysia is that you're partially right. Yes, there was, I'm from Bangladesh, so there was certain amount of pressure that the Bangladeshi business community has put forward to the ministry. It's true. But the other half of the truth is that because you see, this is a syndicate business. from the Malaysian side to the Bangladeshi side, from the agent to the agent from the other side, A to A, I would like to call it, is somehow. So the reason that it stops is because a lucrative trade you can just stop a lucrative trade just like that with government initiative. I think there was other responsible communities or activities should have been taken in that area. So an agent in Malaysian side at that time, I had this report from Penang. There was a recycle center wanted 900 migrant workers through G2G process. But the agent said, if you go to the process, you'll never get it. And they tried to get it, and it was so difficult, the bureaucracy, the red tapes and all that, so they had to go for agent once again. So yeah, it has to be a both side initiative. Anyway, my question is that in Malaysia we have refugees, women in tens of thousands of numbers, right? So what stops, or what are the problems that stopping these refugees, women to get a decent work as domestic worker if necessary? What's stopping them to go through that process when you already have an existent amount of foreign labor presence? Why don't we provide them jobs rather than we just want to bring more in? Because whenever you want to bring more in, that provides agents with more money, that provide violations of bringing them in a lot of segments. So that's what my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashik. Can we have the speakers?
Okay. I think I go with so many undocumented illegal. My friend, Chinese friend is now. You see here how many visitors who came into Malaysia legally per year, 25 million. Okay, they are documented. If they are not bona fide kind of tourists, they stay here longer than the passes was given. They overstayed. They are also considered illegal. So my target, we have 11,000, 12,000 staff. Not everybody is taking care of the checkpoint of entry, but our target, our burden of target is 25 million visitors per year. Okay. Secondly, when you talk about controlling the entry exit, our job is to control this so-called CIQ, immigration quarantine, custom immigration quarantine. Here it means the gazetted point of entry. There are 129 gazetted point of entry the whole Malaysia. But when you talk about the border, porous border is not my jurisdiction. It is under the army jurisdiction, where it is 25 kilometers without occupant. It is army jurisdiction, and if there is within the border below 25 kilometers with occupant, is going to be police jurisdiction. So here, sir, I can't say much on that matter, because sometimes they came legally, they become illegal when they are over here. That's why we are continuous kind of operation where we detect them, we send them back, or we take action on enforcement. Okay? And secondly, when you talk about law to prosecute customer, I don't see any law yet. But we took customer as a witness, as our witness to collaborate that there is transaction between, what you call it, the customer and also the client. The customer and also the lady who, yeah. So even in our trafficking act, there is also, we can use agent provocator. I can be also the agent provocator. So it means that I have to disguise myself as a customer, and I have to wire myself, and then whatever transpired, it need to be recorded to prove in court that this kind of thing happened. So the answer is, customer, they will be taken for investigation only, but not be charged if they are really customer. Okay? So I don't know if they will implement another law so that the customer, everybody will be scared to so there's no supply and demand. I agree with you, but right now there's no existing law on to penalize customer. So, domestic worker, Penang case, visa is cancelled by the employer, and then passport will be withheld by the employer. You report to the police, you report to the immigration say go to the police, and then report to the police say go to immigration. What I know about the case, indirectly, I think I was there when there is a dialogue between NGO and the council. You proposed that kind of question to the. I remember that day, Dr. Farida was upstairs. Where is it? In Jaya Hotel, is it? Hotel Hilton, Hilton. So the thing is, my opinion, the Penang immigration should take action. Not to wait until you have to come to KL, because I asked the officer in Putrajaya what really happened in that kind of case. He said that this case was handled by the labor department. So by the look of it, the labor department can call the employer to come over and ask the employer where is the passport. It's not being settled yet by the labor department.
It back because that's what the law says, and it's just how can we get an authority? Because for my thinking is somebody just needs to pick up the phone and say, I understand you're the employer of this worker, you have her passport, will you please bring it to the immigration office, will you please bring it to the police station? Very straightforward, you know. I mean, I've tried calling the employer and of course they're not going to listen or even listen to me or entertain me, but for me, it seems quite straightforward that if an authority called up the employer, called up the worker and said, you have to bring the passport here now, but when we go to whatever authority, they all say, oh, it's not our job, we can't do anything. And actually, the last time at Penang Immigration, they sent us down to Putrajaya, and we came and talked here, and we got the same answer, you know, or we filled out a form, but, you know, nothing transpired.
All the way from Putrajaya to go to Penang to ask for the passport.
That's what we'll do, so that's what
It
we'll
should
do.
be the Penang immigration should do that. You see?
But we will travel, we just go. Whatever office people tell us to go, we keep going. But we never get the passport back. It's only a couple of times the policeman has picked up the phone and said, you need to bring the passport. But if the passport doesn't arrive, nothing happens. So the question really...
Personality, I can't say much because immigration also not. If it is enforcement division, they have to do it. Enforcement immigration, they can do it. Yeah.
Can I just share one last thing? When I went and talked to the deputy director of the enforcement office, he ended the conversation by actually telling me, I don't employ a maid, but if I did, I would also hold her passport in case she ran away.
That one is some personal comment. But perhaps if you go to the enforcement, you insist to be the boss.
So we have.
The boss is Mr. Basri, I think.
Mr. Basri actually, because I've already told him.
If Basri doesn't know what to do, ask him to call me. That's the much I can do. If Basri needs further explanation, ask him to argue with me. Right.
The example that you gave here, these examples from Penang, these are just examples of the many cases where domestic workers who cannot get their passport back, in the end they are charged under Immigration Act, right? You can take Fauzi? Yes, victims, they are victims, but because of this fiasco with a passport, in the end they will be charged for under Immigration Act.
You don't worry, I don't have control over whole Malaysia, you see. I'm in Putrajaya. In my boys, I won't let them do anything against the law. Right. So sometimes if you say Immigration Act is not fair, yes, it's not fair. If the employer came in, say I don't want this so-called person, worker to go back, we have no jurisdiction over Employment Act. You get, but if there is any dispute, the industrial court, they have to report to their embassies, for example. Embassy can be the champion, and perhaps NGO can also bring them to JDK labor office to get it done, because all this is tribunal cases, right? Immigration doesn't have any tribunal to judge whether employer is right or employee is right. No. Okay. So if you say Immigration Act is not fair, I can't say much, because Immigration Act goes on immigration matters. Because when you talk about workers, it falls under Employment Act. Immigration have no jurisdiction over Employment Act. But if you say that because if they are undocumented, we don't worry. The Anti-Trafficking Act now the approach of immigration is more. It's not really. It's more humane. You know. Last time, not to say we are not unhumane, but perhaps we are more on enforcing. We don't care whether you're a victim or not. You are illegal, you are still illegal. But here, we have to try to change our mindset. Okay, they are illegals, but they are victims, so it means they have immunity. The treatment to them is totally different. Even I treat people to send back, like Datuk Farida said, is totally different than I deport the illegals back. Because I need to convey with the embassy, sometimes convey with the NGO, perhaps the NGO can contact their counterpart. Because in sending back victims, we want a reception over there, their origin country to wait. Because we cannot simply send them back just like that. And perhaps Indonesia is very sensitive. You just send back, and then calo is already waiting. This calo is those, how to say, calo is the agent, the unscrupulous agent over there. They will re-traffic that so-called person again. Okay?
There are many examples, where domestic workers, after being exploited, they run away, somebody helped them to make a police report, that they are exploited. But when the employers find out that they may be charged in court, what they do is they agree to pay back, like they have been holding back the salaries. And the minute the domestic workers get the money, they just want to go home, They don't want to stay on to be witness anymore, because many of them know also if they stay on to be witness in the case, they are going to be put in the shelter home for many months. All right, there are many cases like this involving domestic maids.
There's two more things, I think. Unsatisfied because I don't answer yet. IFO thing. And then media expose the victim, not exposing the perpetrators. That one I can't say much. Sometimes media also have to take the risk, If they, for example, if I want to make a statement, I cannot simply say that specific brothel or specific entertainment place, because I can be charged for defamation if there is it's not being convicted later on. But here, we even when we go with media, I cannot talk in behalf of everybody. Go with media, they try to blur the what do you call it, this so-called victims or whatever lah. And then even they cannot be exposed in the news, because one is exposed. If that so-called person is not being convicted, he can every right to summon back this so-called media. Not the government, but the media. Media is taking the risk. And ILO thing, I cannot answer, because it's under the jurisdiction of Labour Department.
Ask Labour the same question.
You can ask the Labour the same question. And refugee thing, the best answer is we don't ratify to the Refugee Convention 1951. It's a national policy. I can't say much. I'm just a small man, big size but small man. And I did even say that, why don't we, the fish is already in the net, why don't we legalize the fish rather than importing more? That is my saying in that matter. But still the policy doesn't come from me. It's more on foreign policy. Because we don't ratify the convention. Sometimes we say that, they are allowed to stay here temporarily. But if you go to other countries, they are being confined in a camp. Right? You go to Indonesia, they are in a camp, refugee. They are not being set liberty at Pasar Borong or whatever. But the effect is to the government, because that is the policy that we take. It is the directive from the Prime Minister. I'm not the Prime Minister, so I cannot do much on that matter. And moreover, why we never ratify to that convention, also it's not my jurisdiction. I can't say much. I follow orders, right? So on refugee matters, they are here, and hopefully they will be resettled to the third country. And perhaps Rohingya for the Muslim, if the what we call it, OIC country may accept that, it's better still, right? Because what we really have much that US, Australia doesn't take is this Rohingya. They are already here, right? So I think most of the question have been answered.
We are at 1 o'clock right now, so I'm not able to open the floor for more questions, but I kindly request Tuan Fauzi and Dato Farida to stay back for lunch. And those of you who have questions can approach them individually to seek answers, if that can be done through lunch. It's not over, it's just the beginning. Yeah, but just to add on, what came through is the policies, the legislation is in place, and they're good, but it is really the enforcement and the implementation. And again, what Dr. Farida said is, when they train a group of good enforcement agencies, they are able to implement, and then they are transferred. And there needs to be continuous training. And then we hear from Dr. Fauzi and some of the participants here, there is a lack of understanding how to enforce and implement these laws and policies. So as a recommendation, can MAPO, together with the different agencies within MAPO and the NGO union, can collaborate in running the sessions and trainings with the enforcement agencies? It's just a recommendation as a way to move forward, coming back to the objective today, to increase knowledge on the laws and policies in Malaysia. So with that, have a good lunch. We will see you. I will now pass you to Ms. Sila. And can we give them a round of applause? The speakers, their input and insight. Thank you.
Before we go for lunch, can we have a good photo together? Okay? Your cooperation, please. Thank you. Come together to the front.